When I was 16, I was given as a gift to the prefect. The prefect was already old, and when he saw me in bed, he was so excited that his brain spasmed and he fainted. I caused Lord Zhizhou to become paralyzed on one side of his body, and he thought he was going to die. Who would have thought that the second son of the prefecture came to help his father and saw me? Not only did he pardon my punishment, he also concealed the truth and secretly kept me as his concubine. Throughout my life, I have been either given as a gift by men or fought over by men as prey. They are in high positions of power and can easily control a person's life and death. They treat me like a cat or a dog. They never believe that cats and dogs can bite people to death if they fight back.
1.
The night before I was sent to be served by the prefect, Magistrate Zhang's son secretly climbed into my bed in the middle of the night. Xiang Xianger, Xiang Xianger, I can't bear to see you leave. Just satisfy me once. I promise to make you happy. Before he could take off his pants, he was pulled off the bed from the left and right by the people his father had arranged. Soon, the magistrate's wife's vicious curses were heard in the yard. God damn vixen. You have bewitched my son's mind. My son was bewitched by her.
Slut.
Sooner or later, she will die in a man's bed. The cursing continued until Magistrate Zhang showed up, and then his wife reluctantly stopped. Magistrate Zhang knocked on my door, his sticky eyes wandering around me, and finally, he just stroked the back of my hand in a comforting gesture. I have taken good care of Xiang Xianger for many years. Tomorrow is the day for you to repay me. Xiang Xianger, you must behave well and don't make the prefect unhappy. Do you understand? I lowered my brows and nodded, and answered in a low voice, yes. Xiang Xianger, such a soft name, is what men like to call her. That wasn't my original name. My name is Lu Tsuetsue. When I was 6 years old, I came to Qingzhou with my parents to escape famine. At that time, there was a vast sea of people, and the victims were all pale and thin. Magistrate Zhang took a liking to me at first sight, bought me from my parents for 100 coins, and carefully trained me for 10 years, just for the day when he could present me to his superiors and start his journey to fame. The prefect was chosen by Magistrate Zhang after repeated comparisons and with great caution, and he would not allow the slightest mistake. The next day, I was wrapped in a brocade quilt and sent to the prefect's bed. After waiting for a long time, the slightly drunk prefect, supported by his servants, staggered into the room. He was over 50 years old and clearly had a decayed body, but he acted like a young man full of vigor and vitality and lifted the quilt that was wrapped around me. The brocade quilt was unfolded, and I was lying naked inside. A beautiful girl in her 20s, as tender as spring bamboo shoots. The prefect's breathing became heavier, and he was panting like an ox. His face was filled with excitement due to lust. I endured the discomfort in my heart, lowered my head, and called softly, "Master." When he heard my voice, the lust in his eyes became even stronger, and the lust was so strong that it caused his brain to twitch, and he fell down straight like a wooden stake. Due to excessive stimulation, the prefect fainted on the bed. The local officials in Qingzhou were all in a panic. The clinic came to treat the patient overnight. The post station rushed to the prefectural government to deliver the letter. And I, the culprit, was immediately thrown into jail. Magistrate Zhang was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. He wished he could sever all ties with me, let alone do anything for me out of consideration for our past friendship. I went from being a guest in bed to a prisoner in just a moment.
2.
The prison was dark and damp. I huddled in the corner, watching the rats and cockroaches crawling on the ground. They're not even afraid of people. Did you see that? That woman. The prefect died in her bed. Hey, the master's woman is really not an ordinary woman. I can't stand just looking at her. This woman is so tender, it seems like she will be wet just by touching her. It's a pity that her case involves the prefect, otherwise, we brothers could have relieved our anger in advance. No hurry, wait until the governor comes and interrogates her. Won't we be able to do whatever we want with her? Lustful eyes fell on me, and I was surrounded by wolves. I was like a rabbit with no ability to protect myself. There is no other way to comfort myself except hugging myself tightly. It was pitch dark in the prison, and I could only survive on the stale food and drinks delivered to me every day. Half a month later, I finally met the visitor from the prefectural government. He was the prefect's second son, and everyone called him Second Young Master. When I was taken to see the second young master, I was smelly, unkempt, and looked like a beggar at the foot of the city wall. The second young master's disgust almost overflowed from his eyes, so his expression was terribly cold. I think he should know why his father suffered such a tragedy. He couldn't imagine how a woman as dirty as me could be the murderer who killed his father. How could I have such honor? How embarrassing. The master beside him was good at observing people's expressions and stepped forward to suggest, "This girl is not well-dressed and disgraceful. Why don't we send someone to take her down to tidy her up before she comes to meet the second young master?" I was taken away like this, washed and rubbed, changed into clean clothes, and brought back to the second young master. When he was imprisoned in the prison, the jailers all said that the prefect was dead. This news is not true. The prefect was not dead. He just became a hemiplegic. Earlier, he was taken back home to recuperate. The second young master stayed behind to clean up the mess. The so-called aftermath is naturally to cover up this disgraceful incident secretly to prevent rumors from spreading and bringing shame to the prefectural government. And I am the disgrace that the second young master needs to deal with. There are many ways to deal with me. After all, I am of low status and have no power or influence. Even if he wants to kill me or cut me up, I can only endure it. I was terribly scared. The second young master, who came from afar, had a calm and steady demeanor and a silent sense of oppression. Although I am young, I am not without vision. I think people like him, in order to avoid future troubles, often completely eliminate all current troubles and eradicate them completely. I thought, I'm afraid I won't be able to survive. However, when I appeared in front of the second young master in a coarse linen robe, the way he looked at me changed. At that time, I didn't understand what kind of look that was. Later, after a long time, I finally understood that it was the look a man gave a woman. That was his desire for me. 3. The second young master took me away. He announced to the public that he had sent me away, but in fact he brought me back to Liangcheng from Qingzhou and kept me as his concubine. I became his concubine. I know I can't stand the light. Not only because of my status as a concubine's daughter, but also because I was the cause of the prefect's paralysis. If people find out that the second young master has any connection with me and then stir up trouble, it will cause him a lot of trouble. Therefore, I behaved very obediently. After arriving in Liangcheng, except for the house that the second young master rented for me, I basically didn't go out. I stayed in the house every day, never going out of the front door or the back door. The second young master was very satisfied with my performance and was very fond of me. Rouge, powder, silks, and satins are always given to me without hesitation. In his spare time, he is willing to come to the house to accompany me. Of course, the so-called companionship means nothing more than hanging out with me day and night. The second young master is greedy for my body. On the bed, he was not as calm and reserved as usual, but instead seemed a bit unruly. He always likes to press against me, murmuring in a hoarse voice, "Xiang Xianger, you are such a killer." In order to prevent me from being coveted by others, the second young master specially hired a team of guards to look after my house. Coincidentally, I saw a familiar face in this security team. I remember him. His name was Fan Biao. He was once an attendant in the mansion of County Magistrate Zhang. He was a capable man who always followed the county magistrate's son and cleaned up the mess for the hopeless Luodu. I was surprised to see Fan Biao in Liangcheng, and I couldn't help but feel suspicious. Could it be that Magistrate Zhang sent someone to monitor me? For this reason, I paid special attention to and observed this person for a while, only to be sure that he was probably just finding a new job for himself. It is said that people go to high places and water flows to low places. Abandoning Luodu and choosing the second young master is a normal choice for a smart person. At the beginning, Magistrate Zhang was willing to use me, whom he had trained for 10 years, to curry favor with the prefect, not only because the prefect was in a high position and had great power, but also because the eldest son of the prefect was a Beijing official. Magistrate Zhang speculated that the prefecture would enjoy prosperity and wealth for decades to come. He was good at planning the situation and did not make a wrong deduction. After the prefect retired due to illness, he and his family moved to the capital to live with the eldest son. The second young master is going too. Before we parted, the second young master was lingering with me, as if he couldn't get enough of me. He clung to me and promised me again and again, Xiang, when I have made all the arrangements, I will come to pick you up and bring you to Beijing. I agreed softly and made a solemn promise to him. I couldn't express my deep attachment to him and my endless love for him. However, I didn't take his promise to heart. Since ancient times, who can expect a man to keep his promise in bed? What's more, the capital is full of beauties. Once he enters the prosperous world, how could he remember this fleeting romance with me? I only agreed to him verbally, but in my heart I was silently calculating the money I had saved over the past few days, wondering if it would be enough for me to live on in the future. I firmly believed that the second young master would forget about me. Unexpectedly, a few months later, he actually sent someone to pick me up. 4. It takes 5 days to travel by water from Liangqing to the capital. I have never been spoiled, but those 5 days on the water were really the end of me. The bumpy ride made me dizzy. The cabin was damp, and I vomited on the quilt. The cabin was filled with a foul smell that lingered for a long time, and this strange smell made me feel even more uncomfortable. The maid who served me was not very devoted to me and was often lazy. I was not seen for most of the day, for fear that I would cause trouble for her. I dragged my sick body out of the cabin, vomiting every 5 steps and 3 steps. I wanted to spend some money to hire someone to help change my bedding, but I bumped my head against a hard chest. I covered my forehead, which was hurt, raised my head, and saw Fan Biao's iron face. "Girl, are you seasick?" He hesitated for a moment, then stretched out his arm, motioning for me to hold him. I was indeed weak, so I took his arm and used him for support. He led me back to the cabin, and with just one glance, he saw my embarrassment. Without saying much, he helped me sit down on a small stool, then rolled up his sleeves and cleaned the filth in the cabin inside and out. He also took off the bedding and took it out. After a while, he came in with brand new bedding and changed it for me. Thanks to his care, my life got much better after that. During the next 2 days, I was no longer seasick. The cabin was stuffy. For the first time, I felt uncomfortable staying there and wanted to wander around. I was walking around on the boat and accidentally saw Fan Biao handing silver to a fat woman. The fat sister-in-law smiled and joked with him. "Mr. Fan loves his wife very much. He buys your wife black plum soup every day for 100 yuan a bowl without blinking an eye." Fan Biao did not explain, but bowed and said, "Thank you, sister-in-law." The fat sister-in-law happily put the change into her pocket and said, "Don't worry, I'll give you 3 bowls of black plum soup a day. I'll make sure there's enough left." Only then did I realize that the sour soup I drank every day was worth $100 a bowl. "This soup can stop vomiting." Fan Biao said that the boatman prepared it for the guests free of charge. He lied to me about this. I can't understand, since he spent so much time and money on me. Why didn't he tell me? How does this benefit him? This reminds me of when I was still in the county magistrate's mansion. The magistrate's wife always found ways to punish me and locked me up in a specially customized small dark room. It was such a narrow room that I couldn't even stretch my hands and feet, and I would be locked up there for the entire day. At that time, there was a person who always secretly sent me food. When he passed me the food, I accidentally touched his fingers. His fingers were thick with rough joints and calluses. Even the side of his palm, which should have been soft, had a scar that hurt. Thinking of this, I took Fan Biao's hand and touched it gently. "I'm almost sure it's him." Fan Biao was surprised and called me, "Miss?" I let go of his hand, looking puzzled. "When I was at the county magistrate's house, it was you who secretly sent me food. Why didn't you tell me? A bowl of sour plum soup costs 100 yuan. Why did you lie to me and tell me that it doesn't cost money?" Fan Biao was very embarrassed. He took a step back and bent his neck, like a tongue-tied child whose lie had been exposed. "Girl, I have no intentions. I don't believe that. Any man in the world who wants to please me must have some ulterior motive. I asked tentatively. Could it be that you are also attracted to my body? Fan Biao was horrified and knelt on the ground, his face becoming serious. Miss, please be careful with your words. Fan Biao has no intention of offending you. Then what do you want? I changed my mind. Do you want me to speak well of you in front of the second young master? No. Fan Biao suddenly raised his head, his eyes like a sharp sword, piercing people's eyes. Miss, I am of humble status and dare not expect anything extravagant. I just hope that everything goes well for you and you are free from illness and disaster. I tossed and turned all night. Having lived for more than 10 years, this is the first time I know that there are people in this world who do not want to be with me but only want my health and happiness. How strange. I couldn't sleep all night because of such stupid words.
5.
The ship was about to dock one day, and Fan Biao no longer said anything shocking. When the time came, I was the one who felt uneasy. A few days ago, when the second young master left Liangcheng, I thought he would never think of me again. At that time, I had planned to take my savings and move away from Liangcheng to start a new life. I think she is just a concubine. If she stays with the second master for a long time, what good ending will she have? If I run away, he might not be willing to spend much effort looking for me, right? I asked Fan Biao. At that time, the river breeze blew up my veil, and Fan Biao suddenly saw my beautiful face under the veil, and it was as if his eyes were burned. He quickly looked away, cleared his throat, and his bronze skin was tinged with a not-so-obvious agitation. A long time, he clenched and unclenched his fists, clenched and relaxed his teeth, and finally, the silent surge receded like a tide. He said to me slowly and in a low voice, "Girl, the world is not good. It is safest to stay with the second young master." I was stunned and turned my head to look at him. He pursed his lips so tightly that their color turned dark. I came back to my senses and smiled brightly. Yes, the second young master can at least protect me. On the first night after settling down in the capital, the second young master couldn't wait to make love with me. I tried harder than ever to please him, though I was exhausted by the journey. I've thought it through and plan to live with the second young master from now on. My gentleness really made the second young master love me very much. He hugged me, pressed his whole body on me, and touched my fair neck with his nose. "I miss you so much." I responded coquettishly. "I miss you too." Men are happy to hear such sweet words. In fact, they are as easy to coax as some silly women. After arriving in the capital, the second young master hid me even deeper. Even the mansion where he kept his mistress was chosen in a secluded place, and the number of servants guarding the house was increased to 10. In the past, he never told me anything. I live a secluded life, all thanks to my own obedience. Now, the second son is always worried about gains and losses. Before leaving every time, he always reminds me again and again. "Stay still, don't run around, wait for me to come." I have always been obedient. Whatever he says, that is what it is. He told me not to run around, so I did. Anyway, I was used to spending my time alone at home. He asked me to wait for him, so I waited for him, making sure that when he came, he could always see me first. I am law-abiding and follow the rules. However, even so, the second young master's wife, Madame Xia, still came. What's the use of having many servants guarding the house? Madame Xia is the head of the household. As a servant, do you dare to fight with your master? Two fierce old women forced me to kneel on the ground, pressed their knees against my back, and rubbed my face against the blue stone. Madame Xia sat upright, holding a cup of tea, and slowly drank a few sips before she spoke slowly and calmly. "Second master really likes you, and even after coming to the capital, he couldn't leave you behind, so he eagerly brought you here. Look up and let me see." The old woman pulled my chin up without saying a word. I was forced to look up high. Mrs. Xia's gaze fell on my face, and her eyes flashed with surprise. "No wonder," she said, "you were born with a charming appearance. No wonder the second master lost his soul for you. I want to see, If your body is abused by others one after another, will someone as self-disciplined as the second master still look at you? 6. I was tied up and stuffed into a carriage and taken straight to a brothel. A handkerchief was stuffed in my mouth, and my legs were tied with ropes. I fell on the car like a pig, shouting to the sky and the earth, but no one answered. Fortunately, Fan Biao came to rescue me. "Girl, I'll take you away." He was strong and had some martial arts skills. He knocked down the people arranged by Mrs. Xia and took me away to escape. We planned to escape from the capital first, and then make long-term plans after we reached Nanjing next door and resolve the crisis. I smeared black ash on my face to hide some of my beauty. Fan Biao looked at me, seeming to want to say something but stopping himself. I asked him, "What?" He turned away awkwardly and explained quickly, "It can't be covered, girl." I leaned forward and looked into the water tank. Because her face was smeared with black, the small part of her neck that was exposed outside her collar was as eye-catchingly white as milk. With the black face as a backdrop, it becomes even harder to ignore. I was angry with myself, so I grabbed a handful of ashes and smeared my neck with it. But my fingers stained by black ash are as white as jade. There's a kind of fragmented beauty that even I can't help but lose my mind. I dejectedly threw the black ash in my hand, covered my face, and cried uncontrollably. Fan Biao walked silently to my side. A shadow fell upon me. He squatted down and comforted her softly. "Don't be afraid, girl. I swear to protect you till my death." I stopped crying, raised my tearful eyes, and said to him, "Thank you." He shook his head. "The burly man is strong and powerful. The bronze skin makes him look like he has iron bones and a cold and strong look." But the way he looked at me was so soft, as if my tears could melt his iron bones and make him willing to die. For many years, I have been content with being humble and accepting favors, and have worked hard for more than 10 years just to make a living. However, in the end, I was penniless, living on the streets, hiding from place to place, like a stray dog. The person who whispers in my ear cannot be relied upon. Instead, it is the man who has never gained any benefit from me who saved me from dire straits. Whatever. If I could escape. I secretly glanced at Fan Biao, feeling anxious and anxious. If I could escape, I wondered if he would despise me for being someone else's concubine. I was thinking about this over and over again, and I didn't notice that someone was already watching us. 4 or 5 homeless people gathered around. "Brother, the woman behind you is very attractive. We won't make things difficult for you. Leave her here, and you can go. How about you come pick us up tomorrow morning, and we play all night?" Fan Biao only said one sentence, not to those homeless people, but to me. He said to me, "Girl, run." Just as he spoke, he knocked down the 2 people blocking behind us with one punch, clearing a path for me. But what will happen to him if I run away? I hesitated and didn't move. "Run." When I heard his heart-wrenching cry, my head exploded and I ran away without hesitation.
7.
Don't let this bitch get away. Chase her. Boom. It was the sound of someone tripping over someone shouting, "Catch her. Whoever catches her first gets to play first." I ran away desperately, leaving their shouting far behind. Escape from the alley and run onto the street. The sound of galloping horses could be heard on the street, which was originally crowded with people. The crowd automatically moved to the sides, leaving the center of the avenue empty. In order to run faster, I rushed towards the open space. The horse neighed and raised its hooves to rise. My face turned pale, and I fell to the ground. The man on the horse let out a light snort, pulled the reins, and rode around me. Then, with a flick of the whip, I was rolled onto the horse's back. The person who kidnapped me in the street was the Prince of Anghua, a notorious devil in the capital. Unlike the second young master, the eldest son was keen on dressing me up as beautiful as a flower, taking me out and showing me off everywhere. He really enjoyed watching the looks those men gave me. It was obvious that they all wanted to strip me naked, but they were afraid of his power, so they had to hold back their smiles and pretend to be serious. They all looked like clowns. Thanks to the prince, I have to endure the erosion and contempt of many eyes every day. There has never been a moment when I felt so clearly that I am just a rare plaything. But what's wrong with this? Ever since I entered the county magistrate's office at the age of 6, in the past 10 years, what I have learned is how to become a qualified plaything, right? If I were asked to play the role of a lady from a noble family, that would be an ugly imitation of a beautiful lady. But when it comes to making toys, who can be better than me? Whether he is the second young master or the crown prince, in my eyes, he is just a man. There is not much difference. If I can promise the second young master, I can naturally promise the crown prince as well. The next time I saw the second young master was at a banquet full of debauchery. At that time, I happened to be nestling in the arms of the prince with a sweet smile on my face, and as he requested, I fed him wine to cheer him up. The house is full of guests. Everybody was laughing. Only the second young master was like a wooden stake, staring at me blankly, motionless. The prince lazily propped his head up, glanced at the second son, and with a sly smile on his face, he leaned close to my ear and said ambiguously, "Do you think he has the courage to ask me for you?" I seemed to have heard a joke. My eyes curved and I smiled like a crescent moon. "Master, the second young master is a smart man. He would never do such a stupid thing." The prince pinched my face, looking noncommittal. That day, just as I said, the second young master did not offend me. However, the next day, he came to the prince's residence in person and asked the prince for me. "My mistress is missing. I begged the prince to return me." The prince was straightforward and called me over. "Go and ask her if she is willing to go with you." The second young master eagerly stretched out his hand to me. "Xiang, come back with me." I didn't even look at that hand. Instead, I snuggled into the prince's arms in the submissive posture that the second young master liked the most. "Prince, I can't live without you." The prince laughed heartily, put his arm around my shoulders, and asked the second son, "Master Su, did you hear clearly?" The second young master stepped forward and shouted urgently, Xiang, if you are upset because of what happened that day, I can promise you that what happened that day will never happen again." He spoke each word in a sonorous and powerful voice, veins bulged on his neck, and he looked excited and angry. I just remained calm and shook my head, saying, "Second master, people go to higher places, and water flows to lower places. Don't you understand this principle?"
8.
I saw the second young master leave the prince's mansion with my own eyes. His back looked distraught. I yawned and acted like a spoiled child to the prince as usual. "Master, I am sleepy." The prince rubbed my face, as if he was teasing a well-behaved kitten. The second son of the Su family has achieved his current status thanks to the support of his father-in-law. He cannot afford to offend the lady at home. Xiang, you are quite sensible today. Be a good boy in the future, and please me. Even if the crown prince's wife comes to me one day, I will be willing to protect you." I was originally curled up in his arms, but when I heard him, I raised my white neck and bit his chin gently. Xiang doesn't understand how to please the master. Why don't you be kind and teach me?" A flame of desire suddenly ignited in the depths of the prince's dark eyes. He pinched my waist hard and said with a laugh, "I will teach you a lesson now." The crown prince is even more lustful than the second young master. The second young master doted on me and wanted to hide me. The prince dotes on me and takes me with him wherever he goes so that he can have fun anytime and anywhere. If not for this, I would not have known that there was a booming arena in the capital at the feet of the emperor. Ordinary people are not qualified to go to this Colosseum. The distinguished guests in the stands were, without exception, all scions of prominent families in the capital. The most honorable among them is His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. His seat was right in the center, clearly separated from the other noble children. The stone walls of the Colosseum were more than 5 meters high. Spectators sat on high places and watched the beast slaves and wild beasts fighting in small round cages. They cheered and bet on whether the slave would kill the beast or the beast would tear the slave to pieces. And I recognized at a glance that disheveled beast slave. He was Fan Biao, who risked his life to hold the homeless man for me. Opposite him was a gray wolf that had been hungry for 2 days. I stared at the life and death fight in the Colosseum with my heart in my throat. I was so focused that I forgot to consider the emotions of the people around me until the prince placed his cold palm on my cheek. Don't you say that women are the most vicious? The prince's teasing voice sounded in my ears. Our Xiongxiong'er seems to like watching this drama of humans fighting beasts. I came back to my senses and leaned on his chest softly. I have never seen this before. I find it very strange. What's so strange about this kind of fight? It's just one person's death anyway. The prince curled his lips with a wicked smile. Why don't we have something fun? I pretended to be interested. What are you thinking, my lord? As soon as I saw your expression, I knew it was not a good thing. The prince swept his sleeves and said sarcastically, Xiong'er, look at these people in the stands. They are shouting and yelling like crazy. How about I make a bet with you? No matter what method you use, as long as you can divert these people's attention from the Colosseum to you, I will grant you a wish. Whatever you want, I will make it happen for you. How about that? I said, okay. After saying okay, I didn't even waste time looking at the prince. My wish is very simple, which is to save Fan Biao. I was afraid that if I was a second late, he would die in the wolf's mouth.
9.
The Colosseum is shaped like a bowl, with the arena at the bottom of the bowl and stands around the rim. On the left and right sides of the bowl are connected arch bridges built in the air in a stepped shape. In the middle of the bridge is a flat terrace used for special performances. At this time, the terrace was empty. The spectators' attention was all focused on the beast fighting performance just below the terrace. They cheered for the bloody fight. Their blood vessels were boiling. Their eyes were bloodshot, and they looked like unrecognizable humans. As they shouted loudly, I could almost imagine the scene in the Colosseum at that moment, and I couldn't help but lift up my skirt and run. I ran all the way through the stands, up the stairs, and onto the terrace. I breathed heavily and stood gracefully in the middle of the terrace. At this time, some people had already seen me. Their eyes fell on me. Among them, one was the most intense. I turned my head and saw that it was the extremely noble crown prince. I shifted my gaze and looked towards the prince. He also stared at me without blinking, as if he was looking forward to what kind of surprise I would give him. What kind of surprise could there be? I sneered in my heart and raised my hand to untie the turban. When I was 6 years old, the county magistrate noticed me at first sight because of my beautiful appearance. In order to prevent others from coveting me, the second young master never wants me to show my face in public. Even Mrs. Xia, who wanted to sell me out, once commented that I was born with a charming appearance. I have always known that beauty is my sharpest and most useful weapon. Sure enough, the deafening shouting and noise in the stands gradually stopped. The terrace was empty, and the breeze gently blew through my black hair. Those strands of black hair stroked my vermilion lips and delicate skin, making people unable to help but imagine the softness of my red lips and the smoothness of my skin. I took off my gorgeous clothes bit by bit. The clothes fell to the ground. The air seemed to be still. The men's scorching gazes almost devoured me alive. I was wearing a slightly loose gauze skirt underneath, which looked half gauze and half brocade. The smoky pink color enveloped my body, and I felt like I was blooming under a cherry tree. The tassels on the shoulders dazzled the onlookers' eyes. I raised my eyes. They were as moist and clear as if soaked in spring water. The corners of my mouth turned up, forming a smile. I asked the prince in the stands coquettishly, "Sir, do you keep your word?" The prince was in a very good mood. He said straightforwardly, "Tell me, what do you want?" "I want the man in the Colosseum." When these words came out, the prince raised his eyebrows. "How dare you? You ask me for other men." "Your Highness, don't you agree?" "Yes." The prince clapped his hands and told the manager of the Colosseum, "Give her the person." The steward took the order and bowed and left. Not long after, they brought Fan Biao. The Fan Biao they returned to me was not only blind in one eye, but his body was also covered with holes and marks from the wolf's bites. Even his face, which I thought was strong enough, was ruined by the wolf bites. I didn't dare look at it anymore and pretended not to care, but my heart was broken.
10.
I never thought that one day I would see the shadow of the second young master and the crown prince. In the past, when I left Liangcheng, the second young master stuck to me and was inseparable from me. Now, the prince has trapped me on the bed, biting me, leaving countless marks of varying depths on my body. Xiang, my dear, now that you've been favored by His Royal Highness the Crown Prince, will you forget about me?
Talk.
Have you forgotten me? I was as soft as a pool of spring water, my face was as red as the clouds, and I whispered endless sweet words in his ears. How could I forget you? I am yours in life and yours in death. You are the only one in my heart. These love words sounded sincere and heartfelt, but there was no sincerity in them, just like the prince's hypocritical attitude at this moment. It was clearly he who took me to the Colosseum. He also personally invited His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. He used gambling as an excuse to make me shine in front of the prince, and even expected the prince to come and visit me the next day. It was he who lifted the bed curtain, allowing the infinitely beautiful scenery on the bed to come into the prince's sight. It was also he who coaxed and invited the prince. Your Highness, why don't you enjoy it together? He planned every step carefully and used me as a means to lure the prince, and he won a great victory. Because they had played with me together, his relationship with the prince had become extremely close. Obviously, everything was planned out deliberately, but when the prince was not around, he seemed to regret it. He pinched me, bit me, and forced me to tell the lie that I loved him over and over again. He was possessive the moment before. The next moment, she was able to put on an impeccable smile and push me into the prince's arms again. The prince is extremely hypocritical. And I, as he wished, remained calm and climbed onto the prince's shoulders with ease. A few months later, I became pregnant, and I couldn't tell who the father of the child was. The prince was furious and grabbed the doctor's collar and asked, "Didn't you drink the contraceptive soup every time?" The doctor nodded repeatedly and said, "The girl has a body type that is very easy to conceive, so the contraceptive soup will inevitably be ineffective." Very easy to conceive? The prince laughed in anger, lifted my chin, and said wickedly, Xiang, tell me, are you born to be fucked by men? They all disliked the baby in my belly and didn't want it. They sent someone to bring the soup. The person who came was not a maid, but a ferocious old woman. The old woman put the medicine heavily on the table and said, "Young lady, drink it." It seemed as if she had plenty of ways to force the medicine into my stomach if I didn't drink it. I didn't need her threat. I picked up the bowl and drank it all in one gulp. The medicine took effect quickly. Probably because they were afraid that the baby wouldn't be born clean. The medicine was very strong and I held my stomach in excruciating pain. A large pool of blood flowed out from under my body, staining the bed blood red. The intense pain made me tremble all over. I curled up in the quilt and didn't say a word from beginning to end. I don't know when the crown prince and the prince arrived. They both stood beside the bed and looked at me. I raised my pale face, wet with cold sweat, like a white rose that had been drained of blood. Xiang, don't blame us for being cruel. Their tone was full of pity and even contained a rare hint of guilt. I shook my head and smiled bitterly. I have never had any delusional thoughts, but I just want to rely on your protection and live a peaceful life. Even if I ask the maid to bring this bowl of luozi soup, Xiang will be willing to drink it. 11. Perhaps because of that tiny bit of guilt, handfuls of tonics flowed into my yard like water. The crown prince and the prince also behaved well. Apart from coming to visit me, they never did anything out of the ordinary. It seems like he really wants me to have a good rest. But I can clearly feel myself withering. Once, I woke up from a nightmare and saw a tall figure standing beside my bed. I tilted my head and saw the face that was completely unrecognizable after being torn apart by the wolf. He was just a disfigured beast slave of lowly status, but the crown prince and the young master did not take him seriously and allowed me to keep him by their side as a guard. Fearing my direct gaze, Fan Biao lowered his head hastily. "Girl." His voice was no longer as clear as before. It had a dull sound like the rubbing of gravel. When I heard it in my ears, my heart started to feel sore and itchy. He called my name, and after a long silence, He asked the question in a deep voice. He asked me, "Girl, do you still want to escape?" I remember a long time ago when I came to the capital by ship. On the deck where the breeze was blowing, I, feeling tired after a sleepless night, said that I wanted to go far away. At that time, he said that it was safest to stay with the second young master. Times have changed. The safety we talked about that day is already a joke. He seems to regret it. There was water in my eyes. When Fan Biao saw this, his body suddenly tensed up. "Miss, I will definitely find a way to take you away from the prince's mansion, to where you want to go." I chuckled, wiped away the tears that slid down my cheeks, and shook my head gently. "I can't leave," I told Fan Biao calmly. "Don't feel sad for me. You made the right choice. A woman like me, who is alone and weak, would go out rashly. Even with your protection, the best outcome would be that I would be caught by gangsters and played with. What's more, one of them is the prince, and the other is the crown prince. If they are determined to arrest me, I won't be able to escape even if I have wings. Perhaps, on that ship bound for the capital, I had a chance to escape. But it's too late to escape now. It took me 2 full months to finally get the doctor's diagnosis that my body was well. That night, the prince couldn't wait to sleep with me. I'm dying of suffocation. Xiangxianger, I have been keeping my virginity for you all this time. You must reward me well. After serving the crown prince, it is the turn of the prince. Ever since I got involved with you, my little devil, I find other beauties boring. Xiangxiang, did you put a spell on me?" This promise lasted for 2 years. In the past 2 years, although I am not the only woman around the crown prince and the prince, I am the woman they often keep around. One of them was the crown prince and the other a powerful official, so they often had to conspire with each other. They never avoided me. The prince liked to have me lie on his knees, ruffling my hair while he spoke sinister and calculating words. The prince loved to play with my feet, and he would casually roam my legs with his cold fingers, and he never got tired of it. This allowed me to learn many secrets that others did not know. I know that the crown prince is afraid of Prince Yi. The position of crown prince was due to the old emperor's favor for him. When Prince Yi was still the second prince, he led his troops to fight. After several years, he drove the Tatars back 500 miles away. Prince Yi enjoyed a high reputation both inside and outside the court. The prince had been patient for several years and had long been planning to launch an uprising. In recent days, the Tatars have made a comeback with great momentum. The border war is tense. The crown prince wanted to kill King Yi in the northern border.
12.
The plan to kill King Yi was flawless. The prince is sure to win. While plotting to kill Prince Yi, he was also actively trying to win over Prince Yi's people. This person, Zhang Sherdao, is stubborn and really gives me a headache. Zhang Sherdao was promoted by Prince Yi and was loyal to him. Although he was a military general, he was quite capable of management and was considered the backbone of Prince Yi's faction in the capital. I fed the grapes into the prince's mouth. "Don't be upset, Your Highness. Why not let Xiangxiang try?" The prince's eyes lit up and he was moved. Since ancient times, heroes have been unable to resist the temptation of beautiful women, let alone I am considered a beauty among beauties. There is a great possibility that I can do what ordinary beauties cannot do. The prince didn't hesitate for long and slapped his thigh, making up his mind. "Good, very good. If Xiangxiang can make Zhang Sherdao work for me, it will be a great achievement for you." There was no expression on the prince's face, but he raised his eyebrows slightly when I recommended myself. Zhang Sherdao is different from other generals I have met. Most of the generals are rude. He is elegant. The crown prince and the young master invited him to a banquet, and their words and expressions were full of attempts to win them over. He flattered them flawlessly, as if he had a very smart heart. I sat next to him and poured him wine.
Warmed with wine.
He looked at me with fiery eyes. I was knowledgeable and tactful, so I gave a look that showed both of us knew what was going on, and left the banquet early. The prince arranged the room in advance. I waited quietly inside for James Dao. About a cup of tea later, just when I thought he wouldn't come, the door was pushed open. I looked up and said softly, I thought General Zhang would not come. Zhang Sherdao said, "How can I not come when the lady invites me?" I asked, "General, are you willing to spend the night with me?" Zhang Sherdao did not answer but asked, "Is the young lady the crown princess?" I said, "Yes." Zhang Sherdao sighed with regret. "Miss, please go back. I am not worthy of your presence." I took off a piece of clothing, stood up, and walked towards him. "Your Highness the Crown Prince is sincerely recruiting the general. Why don't you accept him?" Zhang Sherdao took a step back and said, "A gentleman in the world has things he should do and things he should not do. Girl, I'm leaving now." He was about to leave in a hurry, so I called out to him, "Wait a minute, General." Zhang Sherdao's steps slowed down slightly. I took 2 quick steps and approached him, lowering my voice and saying, "The Crown Prince has set up a trap to take Prince Yi's life. General, listen to me, and I will explain it to you slowly." Zhang Sherdao suddenly looked at me. I stopped smiling coquettishly and no longer looked seductive. My expression only remained serious. In this world, the only person who can compete with the Crown Prince and the Crown Prince is probably Prince Yi. He must not die. After a little probing, I chose to believe in Zhang Sherdao's loyalty to King Yi. I stopped pretending and told Zhang Sherdao everything about the conspiracy between the Crown Prince and the young master. The more Zhang Sherdao listened, the heavier his expression became. If he had some doubts about me before, after hearing the news I revealed, he believed me at least 80%. I am trapped in the prince's mansion and cannot inform Prince Yi. The only person I can think of is you, General. I believe you can deliver the message for King Yi. Please tell the General that my name is Lu Tsuetsue, not Xiangxianger. I am informing you today so that I won't be abused, played with, or robbed in the future. I will make sure that the Crown Prince and the Prince are killed without a burial place. General, please ask for me if King Yi can do it. If he can, I can help him more. 13. The door was suddenly kicked open. Zhang Sherdao and I both broke out in cold sweats, and then we saw a figure walking towards us at lightning speed. The cold aura around him made it easy to feel that he was in a very bad mood. The man took off his cloak as he walked, came to my side, covered me with the cloak, and then, without saying anything, picked me up and walked out. It happened so suddenly that James Dao and I were quite shocked. Zhang Sherdao realized it belatedly and shouted, "What do you mean, my lord?" The prince stopped and turned his back to him, saying in a cold voice, "Zhang Sherdao, you should be thankful that you didn't touch her, otherwise I will kill you." Outside the house, under the eaves, the prince's figure was half in the light and half in the dark. It was not until the prince walked over with me in his arms that he completely came out of the darkness, saying with a joking look on his face, "I knew you couldn't bear to part with her." Well, I can't bear to leave. Hiding in the prince's arms and pretending to be at a loss, I didn't care what they were doing. I was just silently thankful that the prince came a step late and didn't let my plan of tipping off to the news fail. On the 27th day after meeting Zhang Sherdao, Fan Biao silently handed me a secret letter. There was only a blank piece of paper inside, with one word written on it. No. This was the reply King Yi gave me. I tore the note into pieces and swallowed them bite by bite. Fan Biao asked me, "Girl, have you really thought it through?" Well, I turned around and smiled at him. "I've thought about it. Fan Biao, not long ago, you asked me if I still wanted to escape? I think about it carefully. The world is so big. Where can I escape to? I have no way to escape. I have no choice but to fight to the death. Either I live facing the sun, or I die without regrets. What's wrong with hitting a rock with an egg? You have to hit it once to know whether the rock breaks or the egg cracks, right?" "Miss." Fan Biao knelt on one knee, raised his head, and looked at me firmly. "I am willing to die for you." I squatted down and faced him. "Fan Biao, if there is a future, I will be your Lu Tsuetsue, okay?" Fan Biao's eyes turned red. I couldn't ask for more. In mid-November, news came from the north that King Yi had died in battle. The northern border pass was lost. The Tatars advanced rapidly, approaching southwards. The Crown Prince and the heir apparent were well prepared and had recommended talented generals to the emperor. The new generals rushed to the front line. However, They underestimated the ferocity of the Tatars, and 5 of them died in one night. The Tatars are in high spirits. The dynasty was in turmoil. There was a sense of panic in the court, and some officials had already suggested moving the capital. At this time, the crown prince and the heir received a secret report that Prince Yi had faked his death and was on his way back to the capital. Upon hearing the news, the prince turned over the table and said, "Faked death. He actually faked his death." I was almost fooled by him. The prince stroked his chin, very suspicious. The assassination plan was foolproof, but he was lucky enough to escape. The prince's veins popped up. He escaped once. He escaped twice? On the way back to the capital, I can make him die 100 times. The prince smiled faintly. That's right, if we attack him now, he will definitely be unprepared. 14. The fake death has been exposed, and someone around Prince Yi leaked the information. The news must be spread as soon as possible, otherwise Prince Yi will be in danger of death. This is the final game. Whether Prince Yi can return to Beijing alive will almost determine who will become the king and who will be defeated between him and the crown prince. At the last moment, both sides gave it their all. Zhang Shidou's place is under close surveillance. Contacting him at this time would be like walking into a trap. The letter cannot be delivered. What to do? I was so confused that I couldn't think of any solution. Miss, when I was in Liangcheng, I heard that the eldest son of the prefect's family had a lot of contact with Prince Yi. The eldest son keeps a low profile and does not reveal his relationship with Prince Yi on weekdays, so he is not likely to be targeted by the crown prince and the heir apparent. I was shocked. When I was in Liangcheng, I was the second young master's concubine. The second young master was very averse to me talking to other people, so I was isolated and not well informed. But even so, I have heard of the name of the eldest son. Everyone in Liangcheng knows that the eldest son is the real face of the prefectural government. The second young master was just an ordinary person in front of him. If the eldest son is really on good terms with Prince Yi, and if he can help with this matter, but is the news reliable? Is it just a rumor? If the eldest son is not Prince Yi's man, is he willing to wade into this muddy water? I kept thinking about it, and my brain felt like it was going to explode. Fan Biao suddenly grabbed my shoulders and said in a steady and powerful voice, "Girl, now that things have come to this, we have no choice but to rely on the friendship between the eldest son and Prince Yi. Don't worry, young lady. I'll be back soon." Only then did I wake up from my dream. That's right. Things have come to this. We have no choice. You can only take a gamble. Be careful. I watched Fan Biao leave, feeling extremely nervous and anxious. Fan Biao left and never returned. I waited until the sun was about to set, but he didn't come back. What are you thinking about? So obsessed. The prince came to me like a ghost. I didn't notice at all. I was thinking the prince's birthday is in a few days. I wonder what birthday gift he would like. There is one thing I want. The prince put his arms around his shoulders, smiled at me, and said, "Come with me." I endured the uneasiness and stood up obediently. The prince took me through the winding corridor, through pavilions and towers, and came to a solemn courtyard. There was a wooden cross in the center of the courtyard, and at this moment, a bloody man was tied to the cross. It's Fan Biao. My legs went weak, and I almost collapsed to the ground. The prince still had a faint smile on his face. "He is your man, tell me. Where did he go today?" I looked at the prince. His eyes were as vicious as if they were filled with poison. Don't want to talk? Well, I'll tell you. He went to see Su Yuqing and told her that Prince Yi was in trouble and that the fake death had been leaked. He needed help quickly. At this point, the prince laughed quietly. "Xiang, do you know that Su Yuqing is the prince's secret agent?" My heart, which was hanging in the air, finally died. The prince lifted up his clothes, sat down on the armchair leisurely, and pulled me, with a pale face, to sit on his lap. He hugged me, calm and composed, and said, "Let's get started." Then, rows of servants carrying various instruments of torture came in one after another, standing in an orderly manner on both sides. Next to the execution rack, 2 men in black clothes dressed identically stood on the left and right. The man on the right dropped a sharp dagger from his sleeve and stabbed it into Fan Biao's only remaining eye with a clean move. The intense pain made him whimper and scream. However, his mouth was blocked and his screams were broken. I stood up from the prince's legs in a flash, my whole body shaky. The prince said, "Continue." The man in black picked out a very thin knife from the torture instrument next to him and started to cut off the flesh on the bloody man's thumb piece by piece, like slicing fish.
No.
"Stop it." I couldn't bear it any longer and rushed towards the man in black like a madman, but was pulled back by the iron hand behind me and my hand was twisted. The prince held me with one hand and pinched my chin with the other hand, forcing me to stare straight ahead. "Keep going," he snapped. The man in black was sweating profusely and quickened his movements. However, after hearing my voice, the man on the rack actually held on without making any more screams. He fainted from the pain several times. They pricked him with silver needles to force him to wake up. Several times. His hands were reduced to bloody bones. 15. I struggled, cried, and begged for mercy. The prince remained indifferent. Later, I stopped moving and stared at Fan Biao like a puppet. I lowered my head and said to the prince, "Master, give him a quick death." The prince sneered. "Xiang'er is willing to do that?" I struggled again numbly. The prince loosened his grip on me. I slowly stood up from his legs and walked towards Fan Biao step by step. Passing by 2 rows of densely packed torture instruments, I picked out a sharp knife that looked like one used to slaughter pigs. I gripped the knife handle tightly and cut the blood vessels in Fan Biao's neck without hesitation. Warm blood spurted out, splashing all over my head and face. I seemed to be neither crying nor laughing, and I pulled up my sleeves to gently wipe his bloody face. "Don't be afraid. It won't hurt soon. It won't hurt soon." There's no way to clean up the blood. A red mist gushed out before my eyes, like a crushed heart, spreading all over the sky. I watched Fan Biao's body grow colder and colder. The last drop of blood spurted out. He lowered his head weakly.
He died.
It's better to die. After death, you don't have to endure inhuman torture anymore. Death may be a relief. I wanted to laugh, but my muscles wouldn't obey me, and I couldn't even put on the smile I usually love to put on. I wanted to cry, but as soon as a slight sob came out of my throat, a large mouthful of blood spurted out with a wow. The world was spinning, and I fell on my back, hoping never to wake up. "Xiang'er, don't play dead for me. When you wake up, I will settle the score with you." But when I woke up, the prince was not by my side. The Tatars attacked from the south. The dynasty was in danger of moving its capital. The old emperor was unwilling to abandon the prosperity of the capital, so he moved the capital and fled like a stray dog. In desperation, he led all the officials to pray, fast in the temple, and ask God for mercy and salvation. The crown prince and the heir apparent would naturally follow as well. Coincidentally, on the day when the emperor returned to the palace after the fast, news came that Prince Yi was not dead, but had returned to the capital with serious injuries. The emperor realized that this was God's response to him and went to Prince Yi's mansion overnight to bring his second son into the palace for treatment. At that time, the prince was still in the temple, continuing to fast for his elderly father to show his filial piety and sincere prayers to heaven. They schemed and planned everything, but ultimately failed to kill King Yi. I met King Yi. The first thing he said to me was, "Thank you for saving my life." I raised my eyes, wanting to say something, but found my heart was empty. All the plans we had made before are no longer that important. King Yi asked, "Young lady, don't you have anything to ask me?" He was looking me over. I pride myself on being good at judging men. I can guess what they are thinking just by looking at their eyes, a movement, a moment of hesitation, or even just a tiny muscle tremor. But the only person I don't understand is King Yi. Generally speaking, when men look at me, there is usually a hint of surprise in their eyes. Prince Yi seems to have it, but also seems not to have it. He is indeed more suitable to be emperor than the crown prince. Is it possible to do what the prince promised me? Able. That's enough. I told them all the secrets that I had heard from the crown prince and the heir apparent over the years. The confidential information I provided helped Prince E eliminate the crown prince and his followers at lightning speed. The old emperor was the most superstitious. After he determined that God supported Prince E, his favor for the crown prince visibly shifted to Prince E. He swiftly deposed the crown prince and established a new crown prince. The old prince's clique was scattered like monkeys when the tree fell. On the first day that Prince E became the new crown prince, he led his troops to fight, repelled the Tatars, and recovered the lost territory. Later, Prince E ascended the throne, and I was canonized as Lady Fan and granted the right to live in Chongning Palace. He promised me a palace where I could live in peace and quiet without anyone disturbing me. He looked calm when he made the promise to me. I still can't see through Prince E's mind, and I'm too lazy to guess or watch anymore. Shortly after the new emperor ascended the throne, the old prince was found dead on the street. The Yonghua mansion was confiscated, and the property was confiscated. The once arrogant and domineering prince was eaten to death by wild wolves on the way to exile, and his body was mutilated. Upon hearing the news, I lit the eternal lamp in Chongning Palace. Chongning Palace was separated from the emperor's harem and was considered a specially built palace. Plum trees were planted around the palace, and the emperor issued an edict prohibiting concubines from disturbing the palace. Occasionally, the emperor would come to Chongning Palace for a short visit, but he never stayed overnight. Over time, rumors spread in the harem that the emperor's most special woman lived in Chongning Palace. The emperor's favorite concubine, relying on the emperor's favor, came to the palace to cause trouble for me regardless of anything. She came in a rage and found that there were tablets of other men in my palace. The man's surname is Fan, and I am Mrs. Fan chosen by the emperor. The favored concubine suddenly realized, came with joy, and left with happiness. The following year, the favorite concubine died of childbirth complications. Before she died, she insisted on entrusting the newborn princess to me. From then on, a little baby finally appeared in the Chongning Palace, which had been deserted for many years. The little doll was adorable, and the emperor loved her very much. The emperor often took her out of the palace to play. The princess is filial. Whenever she finds something delicious or fun outside the palace, she always remembers to bring some back for me. Once, she brought me some sour plum soup. I held the sour plum soup in my hand and asked her, "Is it expensive?" She said, "It's not expensive, only 3.04 cents. I recalled the past and was in a rare mood to talk, so I said to her, "I once drank this soup on a boat. At that time, this soup was very expensive, costing 100 yuan for a bowl." The little girl said sagely, "Supplies are scarce on the ship, and everything is expensive. This sour plum soup is a hot commodity. Naturally, it's even more expensive. Yes, it's as precious as my life. The man who bought me sour plum soup probably owes me something in this life, and I will never be able to repay you in my entire life."